today's session is Introduction to Qlik GeoAnalytics and Custom Geographies. Today's presenter is Joe Bajo. He's a consultant at Infozone, and my name is Shima Ozins, today's host. That being said, I will pass the ball to you, Joe. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hey everybody, welcome to today's introduction to Qlik GeoAnalytics. My name is Joe Bajo, obviously as Shima introduced me. Today we kind of have, the way we have this webinar structured, the first part we're going to kind of give an overview of Qlik GeoAnalytics, kind of a product comparison, some high-level examples, and then in the second part we'll get into the demo. We'll cover kind of a high-level geoanalytics demo, and then we'll get into the custom geographies example. And primarily what we're focusing on here is, what is Qlik GeoAnalytics? So basically high-level product overview. Qlik GeoAnalytics is Qlik's geospatial visualization and geographic analysis package. It's a separate product from Qlik Sense. You have to contact your Qlik rep to get the licensing for GeoAnalytics. Well, as we'll see later, when you purchase the product, it will run on the Qlik Sense platform, and you'll be able to see it in your extensions, the different objects and layers that come with GeoAnalytics. And then a big part of it is, big part of GeoAnalytics is their integrated location library. About a year ago, January 2017, Qlik purchased WO Maps, who they had been partnering with for a while, and this is where they get their huge integrated location library. And what we mean by that is, for example, you have a value in the field, let's say it's Illinois, a geographic value. The integrated location library in GeoAnalytics and Qlik knows where Illinois is. You don't need anything about concerning latitude and longitude. You just need to have Illinois there, and it will locate that for you. There is some kind of ambiguity there and potential problems. For example, the state of Georgia, the country of Georgia. But we have ways to define those a little more specifically and give those stronger definitions. But generally, it does know where various locations are, which is a powerful component of Qlik. You don't need to load in any other maps or any other layers. And obviously the Qlik associative model, you can make selections and see that reflected in your mapping and other visualizations as well. So some capabilities here. You're really able to leverage the location library, as we just mentioned, but it does have compatibility with external sources, which is nice if you do need to load in other maps or other reference systems. You have that capability with GeoAnalytics. Drill down mapping functionality is really nice. You can select a state, and drill down into a city, and drill down into a zip code, for example. And we can utilize this through layering, which is a common feature in most mapping softwares, but it's really nice paired with that associative model that Qlik has, where you can kind of drill in to these layers just by making selections. And it's all reflected in one actual map object connected to different layering objects. It has many spatial analysis features. For example, some of the ones listed here: clustering, heat mapping, spatial indexing, dissolving, which is what we're going to kind of demo later with custom geographies, and then route analysis with in-between relationships. You can really utilize all these to give spatial analysis to your maps and visualize exactly what you want. And then another really cool feature is the time frame integration. And you can do this with animation controls. If you have data over time that you want to visualize, you can utilize that by using these animation controls. So, and you can see how in your map how these things are visualized over time, which is, I think, a cool feature. A lot of times I know in other softwares, you usually have to calculate differences between different time frames, or you need to load different maps. But with the associative model and this animation control, you can do that all in one. So here's like a high-level software comparison with like a traditional mapping software, ArcGIS Desktop, ArcMap, and GeoAnalytics. I don't mean this isn't really a pros and cons thing. Mostly just kind of compare and contrast what are some qualities of each. I think GeoAnalytics, Qlik in general, is built for exploration. You can use that associative model. You can kind of look for things and explore your data. I think ArcMap is really, really powerful for like a specific purpose, and you can really customize your depth and give a certain perspective from that. You can, by customize your map, I mean you can go into different fonts, different colors, a little bit easier than you can with GeoAnalytics. And then obviously map file integration, you have these layers, and you can really customize through that as well. Whereas GeoAnalytics has this built-in geographic library. As we mentioned, you can integrate others, but this is the primary capability of GeoAnalytics. And then with Qlik, you can kind of give these side-by-side BI visualizations. So you can have your map, you can have a couple of KPIs and gauges here. You can incorporate different kinds of extensions, widgets, and you can have that all in one dashboard, which I think is a powerful visualization to have along with mapping. So here's some examples. We're not going to be able to, in our demo, go too deep into the many capabilities of GeoAnalytics, but I wanted to kind of show a heat map here. Here's in the top right, you have your animation controls that I was talking about earlier with time frame, and you can show this over time, which is a really good feature. And then you can also, here in the bottom right there, you have a map that shows like shipping routes. And you can kind of customize icons and that sort of thing, which is really cool. And base these points on different latitude and longitude. So there's a couple of cool capabilities I just kind of wanted to show here. We wouldn't be able to show in the demo, but I wanted to kind of give a good scope of what GeoAnalytics has to offer. All right, so now I think we're going to get into our demo here. As we mentioned, the first part of this demo, I'm just going to give an example. Qlik GeoAnalytics, and then we'll get into the custom geographies example here. So I just have a test app here, Qlik Sense. I'm going to go to my data load editor. So right here, my first data set, it's just a sample, pretty simple, state, city, sales. So we have this 2 levels of geography, and then sales by each level. So I'm going to go ahead and load this. We have a successful load, and I'm going to go to my app overview. Now, as I mentioned before, we have the Qlik GeoAnalytics package is an extension to Qlik Sense. So here's our normal visualizations and charts we have in Qlik Sense. When you download GeoAnalytics, it's going to come in under your extensions. And here they are. So we have different kinds of connections and portions of this mapping. We have the base GeoAnalytics map, which is a key component of any of these other options, extensions. It's going to connect to this GeoAnalytics map. You have the animator, which is what we were showing before in the example with timeframes. Different kinds of layers like the area and bubble layer, which we will show. Chart layers. If you want to put a pie chart over a certain region or city or state, you can do that. The geodata layer is what you would use if you're using other kinds of maps. And then we have heat mapping, and then the line layer would be like for clustering or distance-based maps and spatial analysis. But to get started, we're just going to go ahead and load our GeoAnalytics map here. And here we have the map of the world. And this is where that integrated location library comes in. I can kind of zoom in. There's Missouri, there's Jefferson City, and I can go on and on and on. So I think the first thing we're going to do is add an area layer to this map. And this layer is going to connect to this map through an ID. If you have multiple maps, you can obviously specify your IDs. First thing I'm going to do, though, is add a state. And there we go. In our test data set, we just have Midwest data. But obviously, we have our states. As I mentioned before, you just have Illinois. It knows where Illinois is. So now I'm going to add a measure here, a location ID, but it's just your measure, like a normal Qlik Sense object. I'm going to go ahead and make this sum of sales. And I call it total sales. Obviously, nothing's changed here visually. A way we can really show this is by going to colors and then giving our colors by measure. And there we go. We can show our sales by state. It says total sales there twice. Actually, the label comes up with the color. So if I delete this, we'll get it once. And I can obviously select this state, and I can see its total sales. And if I have different layers, which I'll show in a minute, we can drill in and see what's in this state. So now I'm going to add a bubble layer here. And the dimension for this is going to be that city. And so it knows where these cities are, but obviously we can get into the ambiguity here. There's a Toledo in Central America. We can define this a little more specifically by going to location options in country. And as I mentioned before, we're only showing Midwest states, so I can do the United States. And there we have the cities, and there's Toledo. You can see here we have a couple other issues. Unsuccessful lookup for 3. At first, it doesn't really show you what the issues are. If you go to your interaction controls in your log level, you can click debug instead of warning. You can get a little more specific. So Bloomington, US, it doesn't know where the Bloomington is. There's several Bloomingtons in the United States. Something we can do to make this a little more specific is concatenate the city field. So, and I add state to it. That gives a little bit more of a specific reference. And there we have Bloomington, Indiana. We still have one error. It looks like I spelled Cincinnati wrong, which I just did on purpose so that we can see that this, we can debug something like back in the data this way. I won't go back and change it right now just because we have to reload and everything, but I wanted to show off that you can debug certain issues like spelling this way, and then if we spell it right, obviously Cincinnati will come up here. So now that we've kind of clarified that, we can go ahead and add our measure, which is our sum of sales. It's going to be the same thing. So because this is actually also potentially a location, and you can see our cities went away here, I need to define this to be our dimension. And there we go. We can see that we get our states back, and we do this in location options. I'm going to make the same color customization as I did for the state sales. Just by measure, I'm going to delete this label so it doesn't show up twice. And there we go. And we have our state, we have our city. I can select my state, I can zoom in, I can see my cities here, and so on. We can also kind of make this more of a drill down, which is a cool feature. So, and I would do that in the same way we would do a normal drill down in Qlik Sense. Just add a drill down dimension in your master items here. First one's just going to be state. Second one will be city. I'll just call this the geo drill down for now. And then I'm going to actually add this as the new dimension here. So I had state, I'm going to put dimension geo drill down, and the same thing here. I'm going to make this the geo drill down. And because this is a drill down and now the dimension is based on that, we see the both of our layers, our aerial layer and our bubble layer in the state. So I can actually restrict this in our layer options. I can restrict this drill down to 0 so that we only see the area layer at the highest level. And I can restrict this drill down to 1 so that we only see this layer at the restricted drill down of 1. And we know our drill down of 1 will be city and our drill down of 0 will be state. So right now we have nothing selected, and that's our state. I can go ahead and drill down on a state, and I see our cities. And we have Springfield and Chicago and various cities of Illinois. So now we're going to go into our custom geographies example. I'm going to go back to the script, and we're going to load a different data set. Just going to comment this one out. And here's our new data set. Basically, it's an inline load. We have 2 fields, pretty simple, state and region. And what we're trying to do is give geographic definition to these regions. As we mentioned before, we know that GeoAnalytics internally has a definition geographically for Alabama and knows where Alabama is. The South is very ambiguous. It doesn't know where to place that. So what we're going to try to do is use a feature in our operation called dissolve. We're going to dissolve this region onto the known geographic definitions of the states in that region. So we can actually just do this pretty simply through the Qlik GeoAnalytics connector. I just need to add that connector, and I can do that through the create new connections, and then our Qlik GeoAnalytics connector. I'll just name it Qlik GeoAnalytics connector. Test our connection and add that connection. So now we're going to go to where you would normally select your data for any other kind of traditional data connection in QlikSense. And we get this operations menu here. We have a number of different functions. I think I listed some of them in the PowerPoint. Binning, within, obviously clustering is very popular. The one we're doing here is dissolving. Like as I mentioned, we're dissolving this region field onto the state field. So that dissolve field is going to be region. Our resolution will just leave auto. Larger data sets, you can kind of change this. Shouldn't be a problem right now. Our dissolve definition data set, I'm just going to go ahead and name it dissolve depth. I'm just going to leave it here. But this is basically our data set that we are, from the fields that we are dissolving on. So it's a loaded table. We've already loaded our table here in line in the script. Otherwise, you can customize this however your data is coming in. The table name was areas. So now our table fields. We need a key and then the geometry that is known, and then we'll list our dissolving field. Because I guess our key and our geography field are going to be the same. This is the most unique field, is state. I'm just going to list it twice. So our key field will be state. That's also our dissolving geometry, and then region. We'll go ahead and load distinct. These rows are actually distinct, but it's always good practice for something like this. Our location ID suffix, you can give specificity to your geographic region this way. We showed this actually in the map object already, where we had that issue where Toledo was coming up in the Central America, and then we defined it as US, and then it obviously came up to Ohio. We can do the same thing here and just define this as US. And then our CRS is the coordinate reference system. We just leave it for auto. That's pretty standard mapping reference system. If you're doing any other kinds of reference systems, you have any other kinds of maps, you would want to define this here. But we're just going to leave it at auto for now. And then our geometries to dissolve, we actually don't have one because we're dissolving on a field that's already in our loaded table. If that wasn't the case, you'd need to make sure there's some linking fields here so that the data sets could connect. But for now, we just have already our dissolving field, and then or the field that we're trying to dissolve in, or the field we're dissolving, and then this field we're dissolving on. So this is our operation setup and it's going to auto-generate a script here once we click next. Oh, I forgot to define the geometry type. It needs to be location named area for this case. Like I mentioned, we've been talking about Michigan. It knows where like Michigan and Minnesota is. That's the location named area. If this was any other kind of geometry type, this is where you would define it. So there's our load. We're only going to use the dissolved table. That's region and region geometry. This is going to be what we actually load. There's some back-end fields here in the dissolved def table that we're actually creating. If you want to take a look at that, you can select that. But for now, we're just going to, for the UI, load this table, dissolved table. And then it's going to auto-generate and spit out this potentially intimidating-looking script. Basically, what it's doing is taking this region field and giving it geographic definition. So, for example, that coordinate reference system we were showing, it's defining that and giving that for the region so that we can map it on our actual visualizations. So there's our script. We can go ahead and load it now. Successful load, and we'll go back to our app overview and we can visualize this in a map. So we're going to do the same thing we did before in our extensions. The GeoAnalytics map, we're going to add one to this page. And then we're going to add our area layer. And our dimension is going to be our region. So obviously it doesn't know where these regions are, and that's what we're actually lending definition to, and we'll do that in the location ID. Before I do that, I want to show the field region geometry. I can hover over it here, and basically it's just an array of latitude and longitude coordinates. And this is what it's going to use to define these regions. And we're going to list this as what would be our measure and our location ID. But obviously each region, there's 5 regions we loaded, will have one of these as their geometry. So we already have our dimension. Should just be our dimension for our area layer, sorry, and that is region. And then we're adding region geometry will just be our measure because that is our defining location ID. And there we go, and we can see it's using these coordinates to define these regions. I'll go ahead and add the color dimension so that we can see this a little easier. And there we go. And you can add similar drill down features that we had before where we use like a region layer and a region area layer and then a state area layer. And we can drill into that and see that as well. And you can customize this using other geographies within using the within operation, and you can define those again with dissolve, and there's a number of ways you can go from here. But this is high level how you can define your custom geographies. And I think that ends our demo here, and Shima, I think we can open it up to some questions.
Okay, thank you, Joe. At this point, I'd like you to type in your questions, if you have any, in the Q&A panel. Okay, and then while we're waiting for the questions to come in, I'd like to show you where you can get the recordings of our webinars. So if you go to the zone.infozoneus.com, you can go to the knowledge base page, and then you can filter to the material type, video, and you should be able to browse all the recordings that we have from the past. So please utilize this custom portal, the zone.infozoneus.com. So that being said, let me read out the questions that I'm getting. Okay. And again, please type in any questions that you may have, and Joe will try to answer the questions. Okay, so Joe, I have a few coming in. Can you use indoor-based maps or buildings schematics in GeoAnalytics?
Yeah, you actually can. Obviously, it's not built in with the WO maps or anything like that, because those would be you know, store specific, for example. But you can load these into Qlik GeoAnalytics, AutoCAD files, anything like that. You just need to make sure that it has a defined reference system so that you can connect fields to it and that sort of thing. And you need some kind of ID field to link those schematics. And you would do this, you would load some like AutoCAD file, for example, or any other kind of map for that matter in through the Qlik connector, Qlik GeoAnalytics connector.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is the geographic scope that Qlik GeoAnalytics has built in through Eusebio maps?
Yeah, so it has, like as far as like geographic levels and geographic reference, it has some kind of boundary or point data at the highest level for over 200 countries. I think almost every country has at least like some kind of first level administrative area. Several countries, I think 20 countries or so, have like a second level. So what I mean by second level would be you'd have the United States, and then that first level would be the states, and then the second level could be cities or any other definition within the state. So I think like something like at least 20 countries have that second level. It has zip codes, zip code geographies for at least 10 countries, some kind of zip code point for I think about 70 countries or so. But what I mean by point is it knows like the central point of a zip code as opposed to a zip code geography, which is the actual outline. But it has zip code, some level of zip code knowledge for over 70 countries. So it's very in-depth, and if it's not to your geographic standards, you can always load in maps to get a little more specificity.
So you say there are zip codes available for the United States, for example?
Yes, the United States would be one of the countries they do have zip codes available.
For the sales territories, like a custom geographies, that's great.
Right,
okay.
Yeah, that would be similar to what we just showed. You could dissolve custom territory onto zip codes.
Yeah. And then the next question is there a Qlik GeoAnalytics, and if so, how does it compare?
Yeah, it's actually, there's Qlik GeoAnalytics, and it operates pretty much the same as what we showed here today. Base map, layers, integration with external mapping services, all that stuff. And obviously, I think especially because QlikView and a lot of clients and Qlik users utilize QlikView and they have existing infrastructure in QlikView, it's something you can integrate with that existing infrastructure. And you can visualize your data geographically that you've had in your existing QlikView apps.
Cool. I'm not seeing any other questions, but if you have any questions at the moment, please type into the Q&A chat panel. But I personally think this session was great because, Joe, you were giving some little tips on, how to eliminate that duplicated labels of total sales, or where to specify the United States when multiple regions happen in several places or cities. And then also, you showed the error solving from the scripting perspective. So that was pretty interesting to me. Okay, so I'm looking at the Q&A, and I'm not seeing any other questions. So I believe we're good to go. So thank you, everyone, for participating in today's webinar. And thank you, Joe, for your presentation. Officially, we're closed. Thank you.